I've actually prepared something a little more formal. I won't read it all, but I'll kind of refer to it quite a bit because I want to cover a lot of points. This is a very important occasion, and I've been asked, and I'm very humble about it, to play a certain formal role towards the end. So can I take a bit of time? I want to begin by saying we've heard great voices already. We heard from Zeline from Malawi and from Teresa from the Philippines, the reality. And I loved the way, Teresa, in particular, you said, I've come to so many of these high-level meetings, and it's a waste of time, basically. This is not a waste of time, I assure you. This is not a waste of time, thanks to at least two people in particular that I'll be mentioning later, Nigel and, of course, my dear friend Sheila. But I want to start with another dear friend whom we lost last week, a wonderful champion for women's equality, for women in the informal sector. I'm sure you have guessed already who I'm going to mention. Somebody who changed the lives of millions of people around the world, Ilabat. Ilabat, of course, was an elder. She then became a retired elder, which we called Elder Emerita. I aspire to be an Elder Emerita someday. But she was known, respectfully by many as Ilaban, and loved. I mean, I've heard it even here, and I don't want to get too emotional about it. She was one of the founding members of the elders, and she reminded us all the time that we were elders. We were not a think tank. We were not a policy wonk, blah, blah, blah. We were elders, and we had to bring that moral perspective and fulfill Mandela's agenda. She was known in India as the gentle revolutionary, but I can tell you, her gentleness could never be mistaken for passivity. She worked tirelessly to improve the lives of the poor and marginalized in society, and I know that millions of women across India, indeed across the world, are bereaved this week. I'm very glad that I go from here to a memorial in her honor in Ahmedabad. I want to quote something that Ilaban said. She said, "The climate emergency is not just an environmental issue. It's a human rights issue too. It affects the humble street seller in the Ghats, the woman who is struggling to provide food for her family, and of course the children whose future is now so uncertain." Ilaban often described poverty as a form of violence. She acknowledged not only the injustice of poverty, but the intersectionality of the issues that trap people in poverty. In her gentle but compelling way, Ilaban fought throughout her life to bring visibility to the women and girls who were marginalized, stigmatized, or ignored by society. And I think of Ilaban today as we recognize how unfair it is that people living in informal settlements, especially women and children, bear the brunt of the worst impacts of the climate crisis. There's still much work to be done to carry on the fight for women's rights and dignity, especially in the midst of tackling the awful impacts of the climate crisis. And in carrying forward Ilaban's legacy, I encourage us all to stay passionate, committed, and focused. And as her life's work with the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEWA, well demonstrated, when people come together with passion for change, great change can happen. And we need more passionate people. So now I want to talk about two passionate people who are responsible for why we're here today. I'll begin with Nigel. We've known each other for quite a long time, Nigel, well before the UK chose you as their champion before Glasgow. And I have actually, in a wonderful way, seen you grow personally. That's a lovely thing to be able to say about somebody, especially a man. And Sheila, we also go back a long way. I'm not sure if it's 40 years, but we go back a long way. And I do remember when we first met that you would talk to me about voice, agency, and choice. And I would talk to you about climate justice. And you would talk to me about voice, agency, and choice. And I would talk to you about climate justice. And then at a certain point, you started talking to me about climate justice, and I started to talk to you about voice, agency, and choice. We blended. And you have been a remarkable person. You were a remarkable board member of IIED, but in particular, with both Spark and SDI, you have, again, like Ilaban, changed the lives of millions. And it's great to be here and to see that roof over our heads is setting out to achieve tangible differences in people's lives. So I want to offer 4 brief reflections on the components of the campaign, and I hope to see these continue as it moves forward. Firstly, this is a campaign that is women-centric, not only in its intended implementation, but also in its design and even in its genesis. The women are often worst affected, as we've heard, by climate impacts. They mustn't be seen as helpless victims, and Teresa brought that out very well. Women bring their own ideas, their own solutions, their own innovations. Sheila kept reminding me of this in such a compelling way. And they're designed to respond to the self-identified needs, not somebody else's idea of what those needs are, but self-identified, and the capacities of women living in informal settlements. That's really important. Secondly, this is a good example of a response to the very serious problem of climate adaptation. Often when we think of adaptation, we think of food systems or of large infrastructure. Yet for millions of our world, adaptation is a very personal issue. Adapting to climate change means having access to resilient and affordable materials that will stop the rain coming into your home. Adapting to climate change means ensuring your roof is sturdy enough to withstand the changing weather. Ultimately, adaptation means keeping your family safe. And I've heard quite a lot of people in the private sector say, I wish we could support adaptation, but it's very complicated. Well, we've just made it uncomplicated. Just listen to us. We've made it uncomplicated. Thirdly, and importantly, this campaign has a human rights approach that resonates well with me. Not only do hundreds of millions of people live in poor quality housing that is vulnerable to the effects of the climate crisis, but these same people fundamentally lack secure tenure or access to the basics, water, safe sanitation and waste disposal, and the kind of services that protect health and well-being. Having a roof over your head is about more than building materials, as you've brought out, Christine. It's about dignity, it's about health, it's about safety, and it's about security. Finally, this is a unique collaboration between suppliers, cities, architects, financiers, academia, and of course, the communities themselves. And that's what's going to make the difference, Therese. It really is. I promise you, this is not going to be just talk. I promise you. We'll meet again at our next COP and we'll say, yes, it has worked. So well done to all for the part you played in creating this unique and wonderful movement together. Sheila, you've given me a great honour of formally announcing the Roof Over Our Heads campaign, but I feel it should be you. But as usual, you get somebody else to take the bright moment, bright light. But on behalf of all of you, I am very pleased to say that the Roof Over Our Heads campaign is now formally launched.
I've been